Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this virtual chat that I'll be hosting with Joe Beck from Medtronic. We've got a very interesting chat lined up today, and this is part of a three-series session we'll be doing. The first one is today, where we'll explore Medtronic. Everyone knows of Medtronic, but really understand a little bit more details about their supply chain. They've got a unique vantage point in being one of the largest med device companies in the world. What are they experiencing with all the COVID-19 disruptions, as well as talk about the logic, the rationale, and the impetus for their digital transformation journey, and specifically the digital twin initiative that they have that we're working with them on. So we've got an interesting session planned for today, and then the next session. The second part of the series will be during our LLamaCon event, which is also virtual now. And that's next month in June, where we'll explore the next level of detail on the journey itself, how they went through it, what their timelines look like, what were the lessons learned, the good, the bad, the ugly. So a lot more specifics of the journey itself will be in the second part of the series next month. And then later in the summer, we'll talk about what have been the benefits gained, right? And explore a little bit on how the transformation has happened in the overall decision-making process that Medtronic has experienced by enabling and by leveraging a digital twin foundation. So that's sort of the three-part series. Before we get started, though, I would be remiss not to thank all of you, all of you who've logged into the session today, are in some way, shape, or form involved with supply chains, managing supply chains, enabling supply chains. And this is one of the most disruptive times, not just in our lifetimes, but probably in over a century. And supply chains and supply chain professionals are in the middle of it. And thank you for everything you're doing in keeping our food, our supplies, our access to healthcare, to medical products available during this highly unusual and disruptive time. So thank you so much for that. Let's start first with a video that's going to showcase Medtronic and introduce you to Medtronic. All of you know who Medtronic is. We just get to have a level set on some of the key highlights of the business. So let's play the video as a starting point.
What started as a simple idea, using medical technology to improve lives, has evolved into so much more. It began when we used technology to help hearts beat. Now we are working to change the heartbeat of healthcare. Today, we are one of the world's largest medical technology and solutions companies. Our employees are united in a common mission to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. Last year, our therapies improved the lives of more than 75 million people around the world. That's more than 2 people every second. Fathers and daughters with cardiac and vascular needs, mothers and sons with diabetes, brothers and sisters in need of renal care and respiratory monitoring, friends and neighbors coping with brain, pain, and spine issues. If technology can improve lives, it can change how healthcare is delivered and experienced. What started as a simple idea is now a journey to do so much more. To use the power of medical technology to take healthcare further together.
Great. That was a great video, highlights the overall business at Medtronic and what a great business it is. So Joe, welcome to this virtual chat. You're sitting in Atlanta. I'm sitting here in Ann Arbor. And we're talking to people from across 40 different countries that are logged into this virtual chat. So welcome.
Thank you, Razat. It's always good to see you, my friend, even if it's in our virtual world these days, the new normal.
This is the new normal. So let me introduce Joe briefly before we get started. So Joe has been in the supply chain for, we'll say, 25 plus years, maybe plus years, Joe, right?
That's right.
Been in this space for a while. And Joe is unique in that he has spent time both on the logistics service provider side, as well as in working with manufacturers and distributors around the world. And of course, in his role as the head of global logistics and distribution within Medtronic, has a unique vantage point in ensuring product flow and ensuring availability and access to very critical and life-saving devices that manufactures and produces. So Joe, welcome again. Before we get started into the main thrust of the discussion today, I think it'd be very interesting to get a sense of the overall size, scale, and scope of the Medtronic supply chain, Joe. If you can give us at least outline for us your overall supply chain network.
Yeah, no, thanks, Razat. Yeah, it's as you can imagine, it's very different than my high-tech days. Healthcare and medical devices are substantially different, but we've got over 250,000 SKUs worldwide. More than 1,000 raw materials suppliers. More than 300 manufacturing sites around the globe, depending on the size and the shape and the scale, and that includes our contract manufacturers. We've got over 80 sterilizers, and that's a lot of our products need sterilization ultimately before they go to the hospitals, the surgery centers, et cetera. So it's everything from ETO to gamma to E-beam type sterilization, which causes some challenges in the supply chain. We've got over 100 warehouses or cross-dock locations around the globe. And then, we ship about 60,000 shipments per day, and it's everything from dangerous goods through clinical trials, through cold chain capabilities, and it's everything from really less than a pound all the way up to full-size crates that we have to move in our supply chain. And we're actually now up to 182 countries globally just in the last couple of years since that video was produced. And more importantly, and I think this is important for all of us, we've got several thousand people in our organization that support global supply chain out of our 90,000 employees. And as our partners know on this call, supply chain it brings a new adventure every single day, and never more so than in the COVID crisis, which really is what makes it interesting, gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's never a boring day in supply chain in general. In normal situations, of course, with COVID, it's even more so. Joe, give us a sense. You're in over 150 different countries. You've got a broad portfolio of products, and each of them have a different rhythm and approach in the overall operations. Give us a sense for some of the differences in various segments of your supply chain by region, geography, country, as well as product line.
Yeah, so we have four really big business units, right? So we've got diabetes, cardiovascular, our minimally invasive technology group, and then ultimately respiratory therapies. So it's a very wide range, right? Some of our business is direct to customer, direct to patient primarily. Others are through more distributor channels, and then others are really more direct to hospital, direct to surgery center, clinicians, et cetera. And it's different all around the world, right? Depending on what our go-to-market strategy is in those regions. But it's all of those different channels create quite a few challenges. And certainly through the COVID crisis, we've seen ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys, depending upon the product, the country, the market, and the timing of how COVID rolled out, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, Joe. Last 2 to 3 months have been, I'm sure, action-packed for you guys. It has been action for most professionals in the supply chain space, but more so for Medtronic, I'm sure, given that you're manufacturing some very, very critical life-saving devices. And, like most people, you've probably seen significant swings in supply and demand. Give us a sense for what the last 2 to 3 months has looked like while we've been going through this pandemic journey.
Yeah, has it really been 2 to 3 months?
Yeah.
It's been a whirlwind. The weekends and the weekdays blur together, right? But so yeah, you mentioned it. If you start to think about our business and what's going on in the hospitals, right? Rightfully so, the hospitals diverted their healthcare professionals to take care of the COVID crisis. So with that, you have more moderately or more elective surgeries, or what we call more deferrable therapies, they ultimately dropped off. Demand dropped off, right? So, and then you combine that with the shelter-in-place quarantine challenges. You have less people on the road. You have less people traveling in planes, trains, and automobiles. So ultimately, you have less emergency and less trauma surgeries as well. And that demand really impacted our business in a negative way and in various markets. But the positive side is that we've had some more urgent products that continued, that actually either went up, stayed steady, or spiked, right? So respiratory products and patient monitoring, I think, is well documented, with ventilators being the topic of the day, and certainly our partnership with Intel to help us do patient monitoring that we stood up in a couple weeks. And then, renal care, if you think about dialysis treatment, that continues throughout a pandemic. And then diabetic supplies, these are really more high-risk patients. So it's increased demand for our sensors and our infusion sets, particularly in international markets. And then we've got various cardiovascular and other medical devices that are really connected to the COVID crisis. So if you think about ECMO machines to circulate blood and oxygen throughout the human body, our pulse oximetry equipment, all those products create different challenges in different regions with spikes in demand, which is good. It's unfortunate that our business is growing in those segments, but it's ultimately good to take care of our customers. And so what we did, really, if you think about what happened around that second week of March, right? We could have withstand the storm for China, right? It's roughly 7% of our global revenue, but if it was self-contained to China, it would have been a different story. But as it blew up from a global standpoint, and you really start to think about the transatlantic trade lane, where the majority of our business is, Europe and U.S., that took a significant toll on the business. So what we did was, especially starting to think about as governments start to shut down customs in certain areas, or at least run skeleton crews, the passenger lift and the market, especially in that transatlantic trade lane, just dried up. It went from about 70%, as on some lanes as much as 90% passenger lift versus cargo, and it just turned it on its ear, right? And that passenger lift dropped out of the market. So we really kind of stepped back and took a three-prong approach. And that approach was, first and foremost, keep product moving. So we immediately, within 24 hours, we called all our tier one providers and did kind of the early bird gets the worm, and we secured capacity with our tier one partners. So the UPSs, the FedExes, Kuehne+Nagel, CEVA, and DHLs of the world. So that was priority one, to make sure we could keep product moving. The other one is we pulled inventory forward into the market. So we wanted to get as much inventory as we could. We pulled, depending upon the business unit and the product segment, we pulled 4 to 6 weeks of inventory forward and deployed it into the markets where we had close to customer need. And that was a strategic decision that we made. And then the third area is just good old-fashioned hyper-focus on data, visibility, communications, and collaboration, and really flexibility with our teams. So we stood up, twice-a-day calls, managing an operation, weekends, you name it, to make sure we knew what was going on with the live TV around the world, because every day was a new adventure when you woke up, right? So that's some of the ways that ultimately we attacked it. And ultimately we've been very successful at our goal, our number one goal, which is to keep product moving and ultimately to support our mission for our patients.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating, and especially given your size and scale and the extent of your geographic reach, that probably takes a lot. And to your point, it's almost sort of been one day at a time in these last 2 to 3 months. And you're right. I think a lot of the initial focus was around China at the front end of the pandemic, and as it spread to Japan, Korea, Italy, and then of course all over North America and the rest of Western Europe and the rest of the world, then it became a global issue and highly disruptive. Also it was interesting to hear what you said about the airlifts. I think many supply chain professionals know this, but a lot of the folks don't realize that most of the air cargo capacity actually moves on passenger planes. And when those flights got canceled and they got grounded, we lost a lot of the cargo capacity to move these critical and life-saving products. Talking about data, talking about a large global organization like this, and thinking about how decisions were made in this time frame, Joe, give us a sense for what has really shaped your thought process there. What have been some of the lessons learned in the last 2 to 3 months, and how has that really built the impetus for developing some of the decisioning capabilities and the analytics capabilities that you guys are embarking on now?
Yeah, I would say it really tested, our overall BCP process, right? So fortunately and unfortunately, right, the Puerto Rico hurricanes a few years back, we were able to put in some a tiger team, if you will, to support BCP and start to run scenarios and look at that. But it's this one challenged us because it was global. It challenged everybody, and it just kept coming. So we've been able to really pull people together and start to analyze demand and start to understand our business better at the product level. As you start to think about customer segmentation, product segmentation, and then also what does that mean in country? What does that mean in a long distributor-based supply chain where the channel's already stuffed with 30, 60, 90, 120 days of inventory versus where we're direct to patient, and the lead times are very short and you don't have a lot of inventory on the shelf. So it enabled us to really step back and self-reflect on what do we need to do differently moving forward? What visibility of the data? How do we connect our systems? The good news is we're already on a transformation journey. So we have a digitalization strategy that Siko Zur, who's leading up for global supply chain. And one of the elements of that is how do we improve our demand sensing as we roll out IBP within our organization. And then the other one is really more in my space, which is how do we link the digital twin that we've stood up? How do we link that into looking end to end from manufacturing to customer and back? And that's where we're headed right now, because in order to have an agile and resilient supply chain, we have to make the ease of work easier for our folks to make faster and better decisions. And right now that's a little painful. The good news is the company's doubling down on investments in order to get there faster.
Yeah. And you're right. And a lot of those faster and smarter decisions require that data foundation. You use the word digital twin, Joe, and that word gets used in a lot of different contexts. Specifically within the supply chain context of Medtronic, how do you define a digital twin? And I know you and I have talked about it several times, but I'd love for you to be able to share that with the attendees today.
Yeah, well, if you remember last time we spoke, I told you I had identical twin boys, and you promised me a twin, an identical twin of our supply chain. So we're on that path, and I'm glad we're there, at least for one of our business units. But what I would tell you is, for us, what it means in our sense within global supply chain, and really, I would credit this to Allison Fowler, who you know very well. But she really defines it as a digital representation of our physical world, our physical supply chain. And again, it's everything from manufacturing to customer, and it includes flows, modes, and nodes is how we simply think of it. And it's really kind of a continuous refresh of our lab baseline. And then how do we really look at total landed cost and start to uncover insights and make decisions and run rapid scenario evaluation to really understand the end-to-end trade-offs in the supply chain. Because ultimately, when we run scenarios, I'm always surprised. You think intuitively, you know what the answer might be, and then when you run the model and you start testing it, hey, that can't be true. Let's run it again. Let's tweak it this way. Are we sure the data's right? it gives you different insights and to make the right decisions for the organization, right?
Right, right. And I think the big difference, because people have run what-if analysis and scenario plans for many number of years, I think the big difference in the way you're going about it, and of course we're helping enable that through Llama.ai, is you're able to keep a living, breathing representation of that physical supply chain, right? And it's current, it's fresh, and it's not like you've got to do one analysis, so you're going to spin up all the data from scratch, right? And that, of course, takes about 85% of your time. Here, you've invested in developing that data foundation and that digital representation that is current and fresh and integrated into all your various systems. And now you get so much more speed with which you can model and analyze and do all the what-if analysis and scenario planning, right?
Yeah, no, that is the biggest challenge. You hit on it. I mean, it's 80% of the time is capturing data. So we still are on our journey. We have pockets of manual data that we have to upload. Like as we went on the journey, we started to learn the manufacturing information. You know, how do you think about production costs, fixed or variable? Do you put it in the model as fixed? Do you put in both? I mean, there's some things that we need to kind of tweak. As we roll out global freight out of pay, you know, we need to ultimately start to automate that to actually feed our digital twin. But in general, we kind of think of it as a lighthouse. So for global network modeling, and it's really a triangle of we've got a global network enablement program that with Wave technology with one of our partners. It's really a workflow management tool and process and technology that we've rolled out to make better decisions across tax, trade, ultimately distribution, production, inventory, et cetera. And then as those scenarios come in, we ultimately leverage the digital twin to start to run modeling and make decisions. And then the third leg of the stool, if you will, is the actually modeling itself and the decisions from that. And it's kind of this circular relationship. But it's been fun. It's been interesting so far. And I know as we talk late summer, start to quantify the benefits of what we've delivered, I think is the most important.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that, we're still early in that journey. I mean, a lot of work has been done by your team, by the LLamasoft team on this. But give us a sense for how this digital twin is really helping you with some of the more near-term decisions as you're navigating through this COVID-19 pandemic. Give us a sense for some operational things where you're already seeing some applicability.
Yep. No, we've got a really good use case that we just recently completed, right? So we ran a COVID scenario, and one of the challenges as demand drops off, and you have to make a decision. Are you going to continue to produce from a manufacturing standpoint and then be ready for the spike? But then if you do that, you ultimately can blow up your downstream supply chain, right? Your DC capacity gets significantly constrained. It puts pressure on your transportation network and you name it on downstream, right? Or even field inventory, right? Where, how much do you deploy to the field for a quick response versus not? So we actually ran a scenario for our cardiovascular group to start to think about what's the total landed cost. So if you think about production costs, distribution costs, transportation, inventory, and you think about what are options to mode shift, air to surface, not ocean and truck. How do we, in some cases, slow down the supply chain so we still leverage our manufacturing capacity on key products? Because you don't want to let people go, right? And then bring them back and you can't handle the spike, right? Because you lose that intellectual capital. So, and same thing happens in our DCs. So, and you don't want to go out and rent more space all around the world either, even though it's a cheaper option. But it's more challenging because you've got to have ETO mitigated facilities, healthcare compliant systems, and temp control and so forth. So we ran the model and we basically said, hey, if we did nothing, what does it look like? And 95%, we were reaching 95% levels in our DCs from a capacity standpoint, which is dangerous, as we all know. So we ran the model, and basically what it came back is it said, hey, if you do some combination of manufacturing on these products, you do some combination of some DC changes, and then ultimately you slow down your supply chain by moving from air to surface, we actually can make smarter and faster decisions, and the end cost for our company, it's going to save us millions of dollars, and ultimately it's going to help us serve our patients faster as we hit that spike, and it's coming, right? We're seeing it bounce back in various pockets around the world and various product sets for our business, right?
Right. This whole notion of what is the cost to serve, it sounds like a simple thing, but it's not, right?
Yeah.
And
No.
and I read how 5% of the companies around the world, they still don't have a handle on what is the most current cost to serve by product or product line or customer or route to market, because while the math around that is not so complicated, to get the data, you got to go to a plethora of systems. And that's part of what the digital twin really is able to get, that supply chain context of the data and be able to serve up the cost to serve models to you. And that's what gives you a lot of the speed in making those decisions and those scenarios happen with a lot more speed, right? And there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears though that goes into getting that to that point, right? It doesn't happen through magic, right? And that's what I like to tell customers. Give us a sense for some of the challenges that you guys have faced as part of this. And I know we'll dive a lot deeper into it in the next session, but just a high level flavor of some of the challenges you ran into as you were developing that foundational layer.
Yeah, that sounded like a plug for my team, because they remind me every day of how challenging this is, and it's not that easy, right? So, I mean, if you think about a company our size who've grown organically and as well as through acquisition, we're going through like an ERP modernization process, but we've got a lot of disparate systems. We've got, acquisitions that are on different versions of our ERP. We have some that are on, they're still on their ERP systems. So if you looked at the spider web, if you will, of our systems and technology to grab all that data, it's pretty extensive, right? So, we've got to get more standardized, and ultimately we've set up a digital core where everything can be fed into the digital core, and curated data, and we can pull from that to start to connect, all of our systems, whether that's end-to-end visibility that we have with a company that we just launched, whether it's this from a digital twin standpoint, and that's the key, because you can't do anything without data. And I mean, certainly you can run algorithms and math, but if the data is not accurate and you don't have people on your team that have the tribal knowledge too, that know that the data is wrong, right? There's an anomaly, there's something in it, it doesn't sound right, it doesn't pass the sniff test, then ultimately it's hard to be successful, right? And we're pretty fortunate. We have, some long-time Medtronic employees that I'm amazed at the things that they know about 60,000 SKUs in their business unit. So
a lot of experience there for sure. And yeah, we will dive deeper into this journey in the next session we're going to do at LLamaCon. But in many ways, this digital twin really is an enabler, right? It's not the silver bullet that solves every problem, but it's an enabler, and is in many ways, a key foundation that you need in order to be able to leverage all the cool math, all the algorithms, the AI capabilities, the optimization capabilities. But without this digital twin foundation, it's really, none of that is very usable, right? And I think it's really amazing that you guys understood that early on, and you invested in putting that foundation in place, because now that gives you tremendous edge and speed in making those faster and smarter decisions that you talked about. Just to wrap up here, Joe, how do you see the sort of next phase of evolution of this initiative? And as you think about that notion of making faster and smarter decisions across the supply chain, what's sort of the next phase of the journey here?
Yeah, I mean, the next phase for us is to get all groups and all regions uploaded into the digital twin. So, and we've reinvested. I think, as you know, given the COVID crisis, we've reinvested in the business to accelerate that. We've pulled it in 4 months because we see the value to do that, and we've got a great team and leadership that's enabling us to do that just gets it from a supply chain standpoint. So that's really the next step is rallying. When we went through it with one business unit, the feedback we got was, I want that, I want this, I want, and that's when you start to win, right? They see the vision of where we're going and how you can link in demand sensing information for forward looking and ultimately get to predictive and prescriptive analytics. And because, I mean, if we can get it all automated from a vision standpoint, the amount of time and labor and the ease of work, we can focus on the actions and driving the value versus collecting the data. And that's, to me, that's the real value creation as we get into, further deploying the digital twin. From a additional next step standpoint is, we're going through and kind of reevaluating all of our technology platforms, both, core planning, demand planning, supply planning, within our IVP transformation. And then we're looking at, making sure we're trying to accelerate our end-to-end visibility rollout. So all these work streams come together at the same time. So we have a complete end-to-end view within the digital twin of to make real-time and fact-based decisions, right?
Right. Well,
or more real-time.
That's exactly right. Joe, thank you for your leadership in this and giving us at LLamasoft an opportunity to partner with you. This is a key thrust for us as we're investing in enabling these digital twins as well. So really, thank you. Let me wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining the session. Hopefully, you found this first part of a 3-part series useful. The next session is going to be at LlamaCon, which is, again, a virtual event in mid-June. You can register for that event on our website at llamasoft.com. And that one is going to peel the onion to the next discussion in the series, which is going to be around a little bit more detail and specificity around the journey itself of establishing the digital twin and integrating that into the decision-making framework that Medtronic has across the supply chain. So hope everyone stays safe. Hope everyone stays healthy. And again, thank you for everything you're doing as supply chain professionals. And Joe, thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Razat.